Good. Call this meeting back to order. We left off under tab B, item number 13. We were about an hour ahead of schedule, so we went ahead and took an early lunch. So sorry to keep you waiting a little bit here, but appreciate Castle Rock being with us today. Item 13 is a quarterly ambulance update. We've got Bailey Doctor, CEO of Castle Rock Hospital District, along with members of the board and staff, it looks like.
Yes.
Good afternoon, or almost afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us. So we're here to give our quarterly update for July, August, and September for the first quarter of this fiscal year. And so far for the ambulance service, things have been going about as expected. I'm going to introduce our new director, and then Todd Toolson, our CFO, is going to give you a brief update about our financials that we're seeing so far. But first, I wanted to let you know a couple of things with operations. So, overall, we are really focusing on our expenses and controlling our expenses because, as you know, in ambulance service, revenue and the number of calls that you get and the number of transports that you get are kind of random and a little bit out of your control. So we've been really focused on controlling expenses, and our overtime and recruiting is also, I think I mentioned last time, recruiting is also a challenge for EMS in this community. So we have made some contacts with the state and the Education Coalition. So we're hoping to be able to work closely with them. We recently did promote 3 of our staff were able to get their intermediate license from their basic. So we're really happy about that. So we'll be able to, offer more advanced level care as soon as they can, get some of that training under their belt. We're not moving them directly into the intermediate role right away. We'll have them working with an intermediate for some time until they're ready. But recruiting has been, it's a challenge. We are shorthanded on our ambulance service by a couple of FTEs in the advanced level. Again, promoting up will help that kind of thing, but we're always looking for good help and trying to think of creative ways to recruit people to our area. But kind of our biggest change this quarter is that we do have a new director. Some of you may have heard that Kim White is the new ambulance director. She started the end of October with us. And when Kim mentioned that she was interested in this position, we were really happy. I've known Kim for a long time. Kim was the director for the emergency services and behavioral health at Memorial Hospital of Sweetwater County. And she worked at the hospital in various roles for about 9 years prior to coming on with Castle Rock. She was also the incident command coordinator for COVID-19. And so we worked closely with Kim during that time through Castle Rock with the ambulance service and as well as the medical center. So we're really happy that she's come on with us. So I'm going to let Kim tell you a little bit more about herself and what she's working on the ambulance. Okay?
Sounds good.
I want to thank Bailey for the introduction. A lot of you I'm pretty familiar with because of my previous jobs. So yes, I left the hospital in October to come and take over as a director here. I'm super excited about it. A little bit of history about myself. I've been a nurse for 20 years. I've done all sorts of leadership positions in Sweetwater County and in other places where I've worked. I grew up in Green River, have a humongous family here, so pretty much related to most of the town. I left for 15 years and then came back in 2014 with my kids and super happy to be here. So one of the things that I really learned since coming on with the ambulance service, of course, I had already worked with a lot of the EMTs in the ER and getting patients from them. But they're all very dedicated to the community and patient care. And so that's been really fun to be able to see and to work with them on that. Some of the things that we're working on is more training, more education, making sure they have all the supplies they need, making sure we have enough staff to take care of the community. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to as well, with my experience with the hospital and my knowledge of the hospital, working with their trauma coordinator, who is integral, working with EMS. I actually met with her again last night. And then also my experience in the past of working with the county, with the local emergency planning committee. I've gotten over the years to know the fire departments, the leaderships there. And so I've already met with them and working with them to try to make sure that we're all working on the same page and make those relationships good. So those are the things we're working on. Bailey talked a lot about staffing. We are recruiting and we're trying to get people on with that as well. So that's all I have.
Well, thanks, Kim. We appreciate getting
you.
to know you a little more.
Thank you.
Looks like you're next in the hot seat, Todd.
And I'm happy to be here. Good morning,
Good
Mr.
morning.
Chairman, commissioners. I'm pleased to report that we're off to a good start this fiscal year. First quarter, we're doing a little bit better than we expected. The September financials, now are a bit outdated. We do have, another month of financials since then. And that shows us that we're on pace to be profitable with the help of the county subsidy, be profitable somewhere between 50,000 and 300,000 this fiscal year. So it's still kind of a wide range. And based on our contract, we would then reduce our subsidy next year by that amount. But we still got a long ways to go. This report is 3 months in, and we're really only 4 months in, close to reporting on 5. But revenue-wise, we're doing better than expected. That's the primary reason why we're doing better than expected, because we've been busier than we thought on both our 911 calls and our long-distance transports and our transports to the airport for flights from the hospital. We're doing a little bit worse than expected on wages, although when you have increased revenue, you plan on having increased hours as well. We did have some substantial overtime early in the year, and I'm happy to report that has dissipated somewhat. So overall, doing a little bit better than expected. We don't have any, our biggest concern right now is just managing the people. That's our biggest expense. That's our biggest financial concern. So we're doing some good work. Kim's doing good work. We're really, really happy that she's here. Our financials have improved with her just being involved in the organization, because she has a really good understanding of, she's a good manager. She has a lot of experience with managing people. So we're happy she's here. We're confident in what we're doing. We think financially it's going to be a successful year for us and for the county together.
Any questions on the financials, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Jones?
I have a couple questions, and it's hard to tell with just line items. So if you
For
can
sure.
help me out. The employee relations for $6,800. I don't really know what that is.
Yeah. And so that first column is the monthly amount. So we have, and then the year to date, so that was over budget for the month. Lost my spot. Yeah, 6,800 versus 2,900 budget. And then I'm trying to find the year to date. We're looking at
82.
Yeah, 8,200 versus 8,500 budget. So we're slightly under budget once you add up the 3 months. We get into timing issues with it, where sometimes in the budget we don't know what's going to occur. But employee relations those are events and or parties or meals for employees specific to the ambulance. They're also, if manager is taking somebody to lunch for a performance evaluation, that type of thing would be charged to employee relations. And yeah, I believe they had an event, some sort of gathering or get together where they may have catered some food, and that's why that was above budget in the month, but fine for the quarter.
And then contract services, can you explain that one? Because I don't know what all that entails.
Yeah, contract services. This was an adjustment that was made in Q1. Oh, no, actually, these were almost all legal expenses. We had, and they were specific to ambulance because, and you've been a part of and heard from some of our employees that were attempting to form a union at the ambulance service. And so almost all of that, which was unexpected, almost all of that was legal expenses to show that we were statutorily exempt from being able to have employees form a union.
And then one more, overhead adjustments. I think we talked about that last
Yeah,
time.
this is a big bucket here because we've got there's a lot going on here. So these are what we're charging from the expense departments or the cost centers, what we're charging the revenue centers to assist them in what they're doing. So there's a lot of expenses bundled in here. This is finance, it's payroll, it's accounts payable, it's HR, it's a little bit of marketing. It's administration, some housekeeping, maintenance that comes from the medical center and then charged to ambulance. All of our revenue centers have a line for overhead adjustments. If you look at radiology, for example, we have charges for those same things that we're doing to support radiology or laboratory or each individual provider.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the legal advice on the union was 68 grand.
That's not all of it. We do pay, we're paying outside coders. So that's a contract service. And then we also pay for some expertise from Aaron who performed that study, that ambulance study years back. He's still on board with us, where we reach out to him from time to time where we have a problem and need his expertise. So it wasn't all of it, but most of it was. Yeah, it was the most expensive because we had to hire experts in unions, not just from our attorneys here in Wyoming, but they had to utilize their partners across the nation that had expertise in this area. Yeah, it was very expensive.
And on the contract adjustments, Todd, I think we went over this last time too, but is that the write-offs?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're writing off right now about 65% of what we charge. And it varies dramatically by the payer, because self-pay, we're writing off almost 100%. We almost don't see a penny from those that don't have any insurance or Medicaid or Medicare. And then Medicaid is out of insurances, if you will. Medicaid pays the worst. Medicare pays the second worst. And Medicare is by far our highest payer mix. We have, naturally, you have more of people over 65 are eligible for Medicare that are utilizing the ambulance service. Commercial pays well. We just don't have a high volume of, Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance that need the ambulance, because that tends to be people that are in the work, that are younger, that are in the workforce, that aren't needing ambulances on a routine basis.
Just out of curiosity, and I wouldn't know how that compares to the different rates, but I know Medicaid and Medicare are always, that's part of the issue, right? They're not even covering costs, right? They're below cost.
Yeah.
Is that significantly lower? I bring it
Yeah.
up just because there's, different services provided throughout the community that are facing that same issue, which obviously is the bigger picture scale with that. And how much of that is
Yeah, and I do a quarterly analytic that I could send you to, where it breaks it down by each payer bucket. So Medicare, Medicaid, all commercial, and then self-pay. And those numbers I don't have exactly off the top of my head, but Medicare is paying less than half of what commercial pays, and Medicaid is paying less than what Medicare pays.
wow.
So commercial ends up subsidizing all of these that don't cover costs, because
Sure.
commercial it covers more than the cost, but then it ends up being the county or the entity that ends up subsidizing those in the end. And it can work in places, it can work in big cities where they have enough volume
Right.
to make up for it, where you're running all the time. So you're paying the same amount of wage, but you're getting way more volume, way more charges out of it. And when you're in a rural area, you almost never see it be profitable. We see that across Wyoming, where either most of the time the organization is either subsidized or it just doesn't work.
Commissioner Slaughter.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, with respect to that, Todd, I get the contract adjustments, but it seems odd to me that it would be 220% more in a given month than what you anticipate.
Yes,
And
that's a
if
good
If
question.
you look year to date, it's still 50% more. So why has it been so much more than what you anticipated during this budget cycle?
Yeah, one, we're substantially higher on our charges. That doesn't explain all of it. It's just been more than what we expected. The payer mix, and I think we talked about this last meeting, but there's been a lot higher percentage of self-pay coming out of the service in Rock Springs than out of the service in Green River. And so that's where we had our trends based on Green River, what we were seeing. We didn't expect it to be substantially different in Rock Springs. We knew that there were higher commercial rates in Green River, but we didn't think it was substantially so. And then again, a lot of this is estimates. And so this could change dramatically by the end of the year, because I'm doing accruals, my estimate for contract adjustments and for bad debt based on the trends, which we don't have a long history of seeing what these different payers pay out of the different, for the different cities, if you will, for the highways, those don't, if you have auto insurance, it pays really well. But if you don't have automobile insurance, it's shocking how many people are driving through this county who don't have automobile insurance, who end up being a self-pay charge when they get in an accident or picked up off the highway. But the main reason is I do a quarterly accrual. And so this accrual that I did at the end of September estimated based on the charges that were coming in and based on how our payer mix had adjusted slightly. We were seeing more self-pay than others, and we're almost writing off 100% of that. And so that accrual was booked in September, and that's why it ended up being way over budget in September. But then other months where I'm not booking the accrual, it's under budget. And then it could be when I do the accrual at the end of next quarter, end of quarter 2, quarter 3, that we have a reversal of that. And so we end up having a positive adjustment to accruals instead of a negative one. So it might be that the next quarter end, the month looks really out of, really wacky in the opposite direction. But yeah, they have been higher than expected. But I think we're going to see these settle down a little bit as we get 12 months into doing this whole business, and we have a lot more data to use in the estimates. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Commissioner Tolman?
Would it be possible to give us a more comprehensive quarterly report though? Because even with Sweetwater Medics, it's good to know where you're making the calls, how many calls you're making. Are you going to Granger, McKinnon, Farson? Where are you getting the most of your calls? And a status report on the calls themselves, as
Yeah.
well as a more comprehensive, detailed financial would be very helpful.
Yeah, this is detailed as the actual financial numbers go, but I have other reports that I present to the board that address the number of calls and look at the analytic that looks at the payer mix. And,
Well,
I've
yeah.
got charts and graphs that show our trends and how we're looking in terms of long distance transports and airport transports
Right.
and
'Cause
things like
it's hard
that.
for
I
us
can
to
certainly
understand and
provide
get
that.
the big picture when you just give us a very brief
Yeah.
financial, it's just not.
Yeah, I
enough.
mean, the main thing is just looking at that bottom line and seeing that, hey, we're profitable so far this year. We're profitable. But if you want to see more detail, that makes sense. I'd be happy to provide
And how
that.
about the regionalization grant? Where are you at with that?
I'll let Bailey give the update for that because she's been primarily involved.
Thanks, Todd.
Also, we can get some data for our hotspots in the county from the state as well. So since Kim came on, we started working with the state, our EMR system, our electronic medical record system. So there's going to be some data that we can get together for you for that, as well as far as the high volume zones go in our county and what we respond to. So as well as kind of the diagnostic reason for the 911 call. As far as the regionalization grant, you saw the emails that the state budget committee had asked us for some more information regarding capital expenditure. So one thing that the grant specified was that they would not allow us to use the grant for building a facility, for building an ambulance bay, but we could use it for purchasing ambulances or remounting ambulances. So they asked us for some more detail on additional quotes for the ambulances that we have. So we did submit that maybe a month ago, and I haven't heard back from them yet. So the last time that we got an update from the state office, none of the 7 recipients for the grant have been funded. The good news for us is that the $2.5 million grant that we were awarded, we can still spend all that money in the amount of time that's left on the grant, but we are going to start getting to the point that if it takes, much longer, that, the clock is ticking. So we had originally asked, I think, for $7 million in the grant. We just kind of pie in the sky, everything that we could imagine we needed. And they, they didn't give it to us. But, hopefully we've answered all their questions, and it does seem like every little thing, that keeps coming back, asking us for additional information. So, but I'm trying to keep you, copied on those emails that we get from them. So hopefully you can see that in a timely manner, but I haven't heard anything back from them since we resubmitted. So I did want to mention oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I did want to mention as well, the last time we were here, we visited a little bit about an ambulance bay. And we did hear back from the hospital officially that they are looking at that piece of land that we were kind of discussing as far as building an ambulance on. They're looking at that for a different option at the hospital. So our board is currently in discussions about some other options, whether that be we purchase a bay, and renovate something, or we purchase some land and build on it. That is a new discussion that we're kind of having as far as moving forward. We have a board meeting tonight, and we expect that to be a point of discussion tonight as well. So that land that we were kind of eyeballing at the hospital does seem like they have other plans for it. So, which is understandable. So.
How many, I think you told us last time, but time marches on and you forget, but how many ambulances are you guys up to? And what's your goal? I mean, if you're going after more funds, is that to replace, the older ones, or is that to add to the fleet, or can you give
Sure.
us a breakdown on that?
Yeah, so the grant, the way that it's written is a replacement of our ambulances, so currently we have staffed 3 ambulances, but we have 7 physical vehicles. So we have room if one is out on a transport, we can still have that third 911 if we need it, or if we have some that are in for maintenance. We would have room for another one. You never want to get to a point that you can't staff an ambulance simply because you don't have a physical vehicle. So over the 5 years that the grant, would cover, it's projected out that, we would be replacing some of our vehicles. We also remount some of them. It's a lot cheaper way. So you take the existing box that's on the ambulance and put it on a new truck. So that saves us about $100,000 per vehicle. So we have that planned as part of the rotation as well. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Richards.
Bailey, we discussed a cooperative agreement with Daggett County in the past. Where is that standing? Have you entered into an agreement with them? Has that worked out?
Great question. Thank you. So as far as the mutual aid agreement with Daggett County, we visited with the state about what it would take to sort of designate a certain mile marker closer to McKinnon as Daggett County's primary response area, because that seemed like that was what Daggett County Ambulance was feeling like they could cover. In visiting with the state, it's pretty complicated when you start designating service areas, especially out of state, with licensure and the overlap with what their EMTs can do versus what Wyoming EMTs can do. So what we have existing today is what we've had existing for a long time, in that the state dispatch calls both entities if a patient calls for 911 in McKinnon. So they'll call both entities, and then Castle Rock still technically has to give the approval for Daggett County to go, but we have said with our mutual aid agreement that we're fine with that. We'll designate them to go. And then if we need to intercept, because we have some EMTs that are higher level, we'll intercept the patient midway. So it does seem like it's resolved. The last time I had heard, Daggett County still needed to apply for a business license through the state EMS office if they wanted to kind of change our boundaries. And they hadn't done that yet, but that could have changed. It's been a couple of months, but I haven't heard an update if any of that has changed. So I feel comfortable that patients are being responded to quickly. We're not, turning them away. If they're available to respond, we'll give them approval to do that. But technically, dispatch can't just call them and leave Castle Rock out of that conversation because it is our service area.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, Bailey, we received a letter last week or so complaining that an ambulance never showed up to a 911 call. How common is that? You mentioned that you have 3 staffed ambulance, 7 physical, and the goal is to always have 3 available for 911 services. Are we diverting those 3 emergency to transports? Is that why there was a time when an ambulance never showed up? Can you give me some backstory?
Sure.
I mean, we can't get into details. There's
Yeah.
a patient involved, but from what we can understand, an ambulance never showed up to this situation.
I'll address the first part of your question, and then Kim and I think probably received the same letter. So I'll let her kind of tell you more about that. As far as the 3 staffed ambulances, we do have transports take one of those ambulances out of 911 service. That, however, based off of all the data that we're seeing coming from our number of responses, 3 ambulances is enough. Not to say that there aren't exceptions and we would need to call in a 4th. But for just to address that, we do take one of the ambulances to do a transport in Salt Lake City. But are very aware that we do not want to delay 911 calls at the same time. So we wouldn't do that if the data wasn't showing us that that was okay to do, but I'll let Kim tell you a little bit more about what happened on that call.
Yeah, so that particular day was a Saturday. We had 1 transport going to Utah. We had 1 transport going out for AirMed, and we had a 911 call. So all 3 of our trucks were busy. I received a call from the supervisor asking if I could go and respond to that 911 call. It was in Rock Springs. I live in Green River. So by the time that I got up to the ambulance to get to go over there, I had been notified by the supervisor that we had been canceled by Rock Springs Fire Department, where it seemed that there was a lack of communication over the radio. And so people were confused by that because it was all going on behind the scenes. But that's what happened that day. I was trying to get there. We were just canceled before I was able to get over there.
And because the patient didn't need to go to the hospital.
Yeah, they didn't get transported to the hospital.
Commissioner Slaughter.
Mr. Chairman, I want to go back. Maybe this is the wrong time, but I'd like to go back to Commissioner Tolman's comments and her initial comments. And one of the things that I would like to see, Bailey, when you come in and do these quarterly reports for us, are the number of calls that you've done.
Okay.
The number of calls in comparison to what the prior period was.
Sure.
What your response times were, things of that nature. I think those are things that we're being asked and are being out in the community.
Okay.
That if we had you reporting those things to us when you do these quarterly reports, it would really help.
Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, we appreciate you guys coming here, especially for the board and staff as well. It's educational because we don't know the ins and outs. I know obviously we've had several conversations. It's always usually complaint driven, like we've discussed. But for the most part, we don't feel like that's our place to get in the weeds, so to speak, on all these calls. We are receiving letters and phone calls still. We kind of feel like that's your board's responsibility or your staff certainly, but I don't want to feel like we're just the checkbook. I mean, the financials are obviously the big piece of what we're doing up here, but we would like to know that, we're working on this, we've accomplished this, we've improved that, so that we can at least take that back to our constituencies, because as we left off last time, it was kind of, we're not going to sit here and micromanage your operation. We don't feel like that's our job, but we do have a vested interest, obviously heavily financial. And so, the more information that you have, I think would be better for us to kind of understand what you're doing, what
Okay.
improvements have been made so that we can be a good partner. So.
Great. Yeah. Absolutely.
Any other input? Anything else from you all?
Don't believe so.
Well, thanks for coming over today. Kim, congratulations on the new position, and we'll look forward to seeing where things go from here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Next up is lunch. We're going to take another hour break. No, I'm just kidding. Eric, are you good with bumping up a little bit? Okay. We do have the discussion of the RMP comments on special designations that Land Use Director Bingham has prepared for us today. So thanks for starting early, Eric, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I know the 4-hour that you requested presentation, is that okay if I just reduce that down to 45 minutes? Are we okay with that, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I want a full hour, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So
It's gonna be 2 hours. Oh,
it depends. It depends
Depends how much
on the
Mary
back and
talks,
forth,
right?
right? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And want to thank Megan too. She's going to be helping out here today. We're going to go through some of the maps in discussing special designations and visual resource management. I also want to acknowledge that Ms. Bencourt, Danielle Bencourt, is also online. So she has joined us also for today. So let's get started. Let's get going. So the purpose of today is talk about special designations and where Sweetwater County stands on some of these. And the reason for that is as we're going through making comments and, working with Mr. De Leon, Ms. Bencourt, And one of the things that came up when we were talking about them is, where does Sweetwater County stand? And are there specific ones that that we would like to preserve as ACECs, or special recreation management areas, as management areas, and wilderness study areas? So when you go through the documents, there's not much to say about the wilderness study areas, as they are staying pretty much the same as they were. And take for instance, Adobe Town is a wilderness study area. Oregon Buttes, Buffalo Hump, I believe, is also a part of that as a wilderness study area. So a lot of those are staying the same. But when you get into the document, we're seeing a lot of dramatic changes between all the alternatives. So just a brief discussion of the differences that I've been able to actually talk to the Bureau of Land Management and go through some of these and have a better understanding. I was not involved with the RMP through the years, but it's been a big learning challenge actually in the last few months, and been very rewarding too, going through those. So let's talk about areas of critical environmental concern. Going to try to steer away from acronyms so that the public really understands some of the differences in these. So it's a two-prong approach with areas of critical environmental concern. And they've got to show relevance and importance. Those are the two things when you're looking at an area. So when we talk about relevance, we're talking about significant historic, cultural, or scenic value. Take for instance, Boar's Tusk. Give me an example. Is there a fish and wildlife resource? Is there a natural process or geologic feature like Boar's Tusk? It only has to meet one of those criteria, even though there's three listed in there. So when you go through those evaluation forms, it's only one that has to meet in relevance. The same with importance. And this is important to acknowledge that. Is it more than locally significant qualities? So we're talking national, right? That's the level of importance that we're looking at, not just locally. Is it got qualities that are fragile, sensitive, and rare, irreplaceable? So that's when we talk about irreparable damage and things like that. Endangered or threatened. Has been recognized or warranting protection in order to satisfy national priority concern. And is there a safety and a public safety concern, safety public concern that's out there that we would designate this? So those are going to be different. So when you look at the maps, and we're going to pull them up, than a special recreation management area, which it's what it basically says. It's basically designated for recreation, hiking trails, OHV trails, mountain bikers, off-road vehicles. It's basic, trailhead development, things like that. That's what the difference is in a special recreation management area. Where the ACEC is protecting the resource, this is designated an area, say, hey, we're going to designate this for special recreation. Okay. You're going to see that in alternative D when we look at Little Mountain. And then you've got the other management areas where Sugarloaf Basin, Pine Mountain, which are currently management areas, where they don't meet the ACEC designation, but because of a geological feature, watershed, which in the Red Desert, that they have identified, that would be a special management area based on that. So those are basically your differences in that when we start looking at these maps. Another important thing that we're going to look at today is visual resource management. And I've got a little bit better understanding now than I did before on what the different classes are. And there's 4 classes. So if you looked at the current map right now on alternative A, and we'll pull that up in just a sec. Don't worry, Megan, not just yet. But the class 1 is your wilderness study areas. So these are basically visual resource management is set up to preserve scenic values that are out there. So a class 1 is going to be your most restrictive. That's your wilderness study area. So that's no development, want to preserve it as a wilderness area. Okay. Class 2, you usually typically see that when you see these maps are going to be in your ACEC areas, sometimes in your special recreation management areas also. And that's not to say that you can't have development in there, but you have to hide it. So when you look at the So take, for instance, let's say a cell tower and you want it to look like a pine tree.
Great example.
Great example, right, Mr. Chairman? That's something that would blend in with the environment. Or you can, let's say there's a tank or something out there that you would lower, maybe not allow higher tanks, lower tanks that would blend in with the environment. So it is very restrictive. There would be a lot of visual analysis with that. It would make it difficult for certain projects. I would assume like renewable projects, like a big giant wind tower project, that would be difficult to hide. So that would restrict some of those developments. Oil and gas development would make very difficult to develop. So that's your VRM class 2. And then when you get into class 3s and 4, a class 4, best example, that's a Walmart parking lot. There's no restrictions in there. That's your best example of that. A 3 is if you drive between here and Rollins, if you look on the left-hand side, right before Wamsutter, you're going to see, I believe it's like a compressor station that's right there. I think it's Kinnard Morgan that developed that. They notice those are they're BLM colors, and they're put in, so they forced them to make that so that it blends in with the environment there. So they've got a BLM color list that's in there. So that's your class 3. So it makes it a little bit more, less prohibitive for development to go in there. So those are your differences in there. So what I sent you was all the different management actions. We don't need to go through all the management actions, just to show you what some of the restrictions are in through those. But as we're going through this, I wanted to show what we have now as far as as far as special designations and ACECs. So Megan's going to pull that map up under alternative A. Okay. And so what you can see in there is we do not have, we've got a lot of management areas. We have the Pine Mountain management area, Sugarloaf Basin management area, and then you've got, it's not called Little Mountain ACC. I'm having a hard time seeing that. Can you enlarge that a little bit, Megan? Close in. Let's start in the southern area. So this is all down south by the gorge and south down on 191. And there you can see the Pine Mountain and Sugarloaf Basin management areas. Like I said, and when you look actually in the management actions in the document, they even label both of these areas, kind of the reasoning behind management areas is they didn't meet the ACEC criteria, which you're going to see now a change in that between alternative A and alternative B. And then you've got the area out by, let's go north. And you can see that Red Desert management area, watershed area, and the Steamboat Mountain area, all big watershed areas. So definitely a lot less ACECs than you're going to see in the next. So let's pull up alternative A or B.
Just to be clear on that, Eric. So that is an ACEC that you're.
Oh, is
showing
it?
there.
Okay. Sorry.
No, I'm asking. Those are or are they just management areas?
Those are just the special management areas, Eric.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are special management areas. You go up a little bit north of 28, Megan.
So this is alternative B.
This is alternative B now? Okay. So if you could go down south.
It just has the 2 up north on alternative B.
Okay, this is just on the management areas, right? We have right now.
Do you
Okay,
want to
so as
see-
you can see, a lot less management areas. Okay, if we could pull up the ACECs now.
SRM, Special Resource Management Area, is less restrictive than ACEC.
Yes. And it's less, and a management area, just a regular management area is less restrictive.
Right.
Yep. So as you can see on there, we've got the Greater Sand Dunes ACECs, Cedar Canyon ACEC, I believe the Natural Corrals, the Greater Red Creek ACECs, Pine Mountain ACECs. Can you zoom in down there, Megan? So they're still retaining the management areas on both sides, Sugarloaf Basin and I believe Pine Mountain, but the Greater Red Creek ACEC. So instead of that is all now an ACEC compared to what we had under alternative A. Then we got Pine Springs and a special species plant ACEC that's also located on there. Okay, Megan, if you go up north now, up towards 28,
This is on alternative A.
this is B.
This is A, Eric.
Oh, this is A. Okay. Okay, so we are an alternative A, excuse me. So that is all an ACEC currently right now. So we if we go down just, sorry. So as you can see, it's considered the Greater Red Creek ACEC. It's all one big ACEC right now. And then we do have some checkerboarded areas up north of that. And that is in the area of Little Mountain. So Little Mountain's basically located in there. Okay, then now we can go up north. Okay, so now Natural Corrals, Cedar Canyon, the White Mountain petroglyphs are all ACECs, smaller designations. This is all current right now. So Steamboat Mountain is an ACEC right now. And then Greater Sand Dunes is also an ACEC.
We have 10 now and they want to go to 16, right?
Right. And when we pull up alternative B, you'll see the massive difference there. Okay. I don't think there's anything. Can we go up a little bit further north, Megan? Yep. Okay, so Oregon Buttes is also shown up there, and then South Pass. All that is an ACEC. And then if we go down towards Adobe Town, I believe that's all wilderness study area. So it's not located on there. Okay, so now let's go to alternative B. Okay, so you can definitely see the difference there. I do want to point out under alternative B, there are no special recreation management areas. It's all ACEC. So when you look on that chart that I sent you, there were 0 designations. So Monument Valley goes from a management area from alternative A to a ACEC located north of the wilderness study area of Adobe Town. What they've done down in that Greater Red Creek ACEC is now Pine Mountain is an ACEC, and the Sugarloaf Basin is an ACEC, and Little Mountain's an ACEC. So they combined all of them into one. And they took those management areas that was Sugarloaf Basin and Pine Mountain that they had designated under currently, that they said, hey, these are not, do not meet ACEC criteria, and now they are designated as ACEC criteria. And then when you go up north, if you could zoom in a little bit, north, perfect. So the Greater Sound Dunes now is all an ACC. There is a special status plant, Steamboat Mountain. Red Lakes East Sand Dunes was an ACEC. And then what they did is, I know it was a little bit confusing, and this is just the data that was provided on the BLM website. But that checkerboarded area that you're seeing down to the south there is all a mule deer corridor area of critical environmental concern, ACEC. Oregon Buttes. So they basically turned all those areas into ACECs. Okay, I think that's it, isn't
It's
it?
going to create conflict because the Lander plan is
Go
cutting across the top. The Lander BLM plan is not going to have those kind of heavy management areas. So by coming with the alternative B, you draw a line where that
Where the
BLM
count-
boundary is, and it's
Oh,
totally
gotcha.
going
And
to be heavy duty ACEC in our county in Rock Springs field office area versus Lander, which is in Sweetwater County also.
Right. Right. That's a good point. Very good point. And things don't match up necessarily in any of the field office on the
Well,
other
'cause
areas.
The other 5
Right.
RMPs around us, we fought to keep consistency and multiple use sustained yield
Yeah.
until you get to this one.
Right. Any questions on that, Mr. Chairman? Commissioners? Taking it all
Doesn't
in?
look like, yeah, no.
Okay.
Appreciate being able to click and change, and that's helpful.
Yep. Okay, so now we're going to go to alternative C.
Alternative D and ACEC, there's no C.
Okay, so there are no ACCs in alternative C. So basically,
Resource friendly, yeah.
yeah, it's a more resource friendly plan. So they do have some special recreation. This is alternative C, Megan?
Alternative D.
Alternative D, okay. So we're on to D. So there are no ACCs in that. So when you look on alternative D, you can see we have actually reduced from the current status of things in alternative A, which is current, and we've actually they have reduced those areas in alternative D. And Little Mountain is an ACEC, and then within the area around Little Mountain is now a special recreation management area. Greater Sand Dunes is an ACEC, Oregon Buttes. So as you can see in here, if you can close in on that southern area. And I believe that area that's kind of carved out is that special, can we turn on the special recreation management area? Okay. So there you can see that's Little Mountain. And so on alternative D, instead of it being an ACEC on top there on that mountain, it's actually a special recreation management area.
As is South Pass.
Yeah, when we get up there.
And
Go ahead.
help me out with when it's special recreation management, that classification. I mean, obviously it's recreationally based, but as far as, you know, the protections that everyone discusses on Little Mountain, within that, you know, that's different than the visual resource management, right? Maybe you're getting there. So I hate.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Never mind. I'll
Yeah,
just wait.
that's the next thing we're going to go over, and what we're going to do is overlay them so
Okay.
you can see the differences in there as to what's going on there. Yeah.
Yeah,
great
sorry about
question.
that. I didn't
Oh,
mean
no
to jump
problem.
in.
No, because we talked about that. Yes, Mr. Chairman. So Steamboat Mountain's an ACC, Great Sand Dunes. They have reduced those areas, the size of those. And then you got the Kilpecker Sand Dunes, which is a special recreation management area, according to alternative D. South Pass, historic, and Oregon Buttes also reduced size into a ACEC. So you can definitely see there's a difference as you go through the alternatives between A, B. I mean, C doesn't have any ACECs, just special recreation management areas. Okay. And
Eric, and D you said has less ACCs than A.
that is correct. Yeah, so if you look,
Eric,
yep,
if you're okay, I'll just kind of toggle through. I'll start with the ACs for alternative A, then go to B, then go to D, and you can see the visual, the change between all of those.
that'd be great.
Make it a little bit easier to see. So this is A for ACECs. And this is going to B. And this is D.
And put those in numerical terms. Alternative A has 266,470 acres of ACECs. Alternative B has 1,605,660. And then alternative D is 246,634. So alternative A is 286,470. Alternative D is 246,634.
Megan, can you toggle between A and D, just those two?
So this is D right now. Then I'll go up and turn on A.
Yep. Thank you, Mr.
I think the slight reduction is that the cooperators took that Little Mountain area and kind of lumped it together, so it made it somewhat smaller than having separate ones down there.
So when you looked on alternative A, you had the greater Red Creek ACEC, see right there. And then what they did in alternative D, and go to D,
Pulled it out of the
they pulled out of the checkerboard, reduced it down, and then put in a special recreation management area. So there's been reductions in that specific area right there. And then what B did is it took all those areas, those management areas that were down there, Pine Mountain, Sugarloaf Basin, Little Mountain, that whole area made it one big ACEC,
Including checkerboard, which is ridiculous.
including the
It's
checkerboard.
ridiculous. It
Right.
should not be there.
Right.
And that
Well, and
even-
it actually even went further than Pine Mountain, the Greater Red Creek
well,
ACEC.
uh,
Yeah.
Greater Little Mountain Coalition wanted to go east, but this one, they said, oh, we're so happy because it even gave us more than what we asked for. I mean, it's going clear over past Hiawatha,
Right. So
which
it's-
is totally out in the desert. Is
Right.
And I believe you opened with alternative B, does not have any special recreation management areas, right?
No,
It's just strictly
zero.
ACEC. Okay.
Zero.
well, that which.
And
says
zero
that.
management. Well, no, I think there might have been a management area in there.
Yeah, there would have been.
Special
Red Desert.
management.
South Pass was supposed to have a
Ye-
special recreation
Right.
management area. The only reason we agreed to that one is because by declaring it a special recreation management area, it's easier to get funding to put in facilities,
And you can put,
parking,
Right.
restrooms, that kind of stuff.
and I think they recognize, especially with the special recreation management area in Little Mountain, hunting,
Right.
big activity down there, preserving those rights down there as an SRMA, special recreation management area. Compare, an ACC, you can still hunt in there, but then with an ACC comes other things, because they are protecting resources. Raptor nest is a good example, things like that can,
Can't be in there certain times of the year.
right, correct. Which is, I believe Steamboat Mountain has a restriction on it because it's an ACEC right now, so can't be in there certain times of the year.
And a lot of that happened during Jack Morrow Hills.
Yeah.
And you don't have
Okay.
to have a ACEC in order to have special management times of the year.
Right.
Those two completely different,
Right.
or can be two
I
completely.
think that is true, yes. From what yep,
And that was a cooperator argument through the whole process. We don't need to keep giving these designations when you have the right and the ability to manage them anyway.
correct.
The ACECs really in many cases don't actually serve a purpose, at least not the direction that sounds like some folks want to go with protection for animals, but you don't have to have the ACEC in order for that. So you can have the management during certain times of the year. And
They can still have seasonal closures and different things without having an ACEC.
That is correct. And so I also provided you, and this is why it has also come up especially on the ACEC discussion, is that there were times that the coalition of local governments had an opinion about going through the resource management plan process. So I provided those charts to you and the reasoning behind, just as stated, some of the arguments against areas of environmental critical concern is that you can have other management actions that can take care of those situations, just like you're stating with wildlife. And the other thing is just take, for instance, rock sites like White Mountain petroglyphs and some of the areas down that small area down by Sugarloaf Basin, that there are other protections out there, federal laws that can protect those. And so those have been some of the arguments that the CLG has made on some of those areas, not needing the necessity of that. And then the other thing is in the document, there's been arguments of you have to show, well, why is that ACC designation, necessary after all the years of expanding those areas? And you have to show that, well, without it, would there be irreparable damage? And so that's some of the things they have failed to show in the document that been some of the arguments. So any other questions, Mr. Chairman, on the ACC differences or general?
I don't think so, Eric.
Danielle, did I miss anything on that? I'm going to go over the visual resource management.
No, I thought that was great. Very great. I was going to catch the ACEC on the Red Creek one and how it expanded further than the special designations, but you guys got it. So
Perfect. Thank you.
so do I understand that the CLG document that you sent us, Appendix D, essentially says no new ACECs. Is that,
Yes.
or I know that's a broad statement, but for several pages, 39 pages or whatever, it is, but
Yeah, and the preference was, Commissioner Tomlin can, she sat on the CLG, but they would prefer special recreation management areas as a way of managing areas specifically like Boris Tusk and, I believe Little Mountain. Those were, let me know, Commissioner Tomlin, if I'm missing anything.
Past and Little Mountain.
So,
right.
yeah. And the sand dunes, I believe, too. But those were less restrictive designations than the ACECs.
Well, the only reason we agreed to the recreation management areas is, like I said, is to give them some power to get some developments in there for facilities, because you have no toilets or anything, even the sand dunes, you don't have very many amenities for parking lots, for restrooms, that kind of thing.
Right, correct.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have approved of that either, actually. But it does allow you to enhance the recreational opportunity by developing some of the trails and facilities.
Yeah. Any other questions, Mr. Chairman?
Looks like they're all taking it in.
All right, that's no problem. So visual resource management, we'll talk about those maps. So then, as I stated in the different classifications, big major differences as they go. So let's pull up alternative A and just show you there. And what you have there is BRM class 1. So that correlates with the wilderness study areas. So when you see that in red, that is wilderness study areas. So, and basically there is no development in there. They're protected. And so that's the purpose of that, of a class 1. You go into class 2, which is, I believe, green, is the green color up there. And that is, like I stated, makes it very difficult to construct development, but you usually see those kind of correlate with the ACECs.
That's Jack Morrow Hills area.
Jack Morrow Hills area, exactly. So you'll see a large area in there of class 2s. The class 3 is that blue area that you see up there. And that is BLM colors. You can see those through the checkerboard along the interstate, down 191, 372, 191 north and south. You'll see all those VRM class 3s. And kind of around Little Mountain area, Pine Mountain area, you kind of get into the class 2s. And then if you can look on around Adobe Town, which is all the way south of Wamsutter there, well, not south of Wamsutter, but go over onto the eastern side of the county there and down, that's a VRM class 1 and then class 2 surrounding it. So that's the way the current things are working right now as far as visual resource management. Then you go to, yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. And ask Commissioner Tolman.
Yep.
Because you worked on this. What was the purpose for the Jack Morrow Hills area being a VRM class 2?
Well, the Jack Morrow Hills, basically, the Game and Fish really pushed all of that because they wanted protections for the elk, partridge, and areas on Steamboat Mountain, and they wanted mule deer, and they wanted pronghorn, and they wanted all those wildlife protections.
Was it basically corridor driven in the fact that that's where the elk typically
Right.
calve?
Right.
Is that okay? Is that, other than that, there's just.
Well, the big argument was they didn't want a bunch of four-wheelers out there while the elk running around on the whole Jack Morrow Hills area and disturbing them in the spring. That was really the driving thing behind that.
Yeah, I remember that.
Is to keep people out of there, and it's pretty restrictive as a green for quite amount of time. But it still could have been managed without that. It's just that there was a big push that they had to protect this whole Jack Morrow Hills area, and that was the start of all of this process. But I have to tell you a funny one. Out on the desert by the Green River, we had all these range improvements for the livestock, off-site water, get them off the river. And they told us, well, you can have this well, but it can't be inside of the Oregon Trail. So they said, put it here. And then it went back to the office and we went out there like 4 times or more. Oh no, you can't have it here because it's inside of something else. They did it 4 times and they went around the circle and every time they go back to the office and they'd say, look on paper, the archaeologist, guess where it ended up? Right where they said we couldn't have it the first time. And then we got it all the troughs in and the well in and everything. They go, well, how'd that get put there? That's where we said we didn't want it. It's like, sorry. For the field trips, we weren't coordinating with the office people. The office people would go, oh, well, looks like the trail's right there, even though it was over a hill. You know, that's how idiotic it gets.
Thank you. Great question. Thank you. So let's go to alternative B and you'll see a massive change in that, especially on class 2s. And that's in green. So
no tour buses, Janessa, no tour buses anywhere along the Oregon Trail. You got to be 2 miles away from the Oregon Trail to have a tour bus or, you know, anything.
you know, and I'm not sure on the reasoning
No
on this.
projects either.
Yeah.
Ag projects.
Yeah.
Either.
So as you can see, the class 2 is massively expanded. Obviously, all the Jack Morrow Hills, that entire area up by Farson, except for what's private in there, is become a VRM class 2. Down 191.
Well, before you move on, that's
Go
called
ahead.
Golden Triangle off to the left there. So that's to offset the effects from Jonah. They got to preserve that. So that's the Golden Triangle, the green batch on the left, and the other part is the Steamboat Mountain, Jack Morrow Hills area.
Mr. Chairman, and I think maybe Commissioner Toman, you could, on the area that's to the west of 191 north, so north of Highway 28 there, do you know the reasoning for that all being class 2 now? You know,
Green, all that green up there?
yeah, all that class 2.
The Golden Triangle and Jack Morrow Hills. We have to protect it more, you know, for the wildlife.
Because the trail corridors, no, wildlife, okay.
Well, it's wildlife trails and anything else they can think of. It depends on what they list.
Okay.
I think they listed all of them, historic and wildlife. When you look at the ACECs and that Federal Register notice.
Yeah.
They listed all 3 every time.
And another thing to point out on alternative B, if this were to go in effect, especially with the VRM class 2s, visual resource management, is that area, if you could close in, Megan, on an area that's just kind of where it's I-80 by Green River, just kind of close in on that area right there. Okay, now kind of go over to the west, all the way to the edge. There, stop right there. That area that's to the green, north of the interstate there, that's just on the edge of of this field office, will make it prohibitive for a future industrial project. I can't talk about because it's under pre-decisional. But that will affect it because if you have a visual resource management too, you won't be building, it'll be very difficult to build.
You have no right of way, you
buildings.
have no VRM, or
Right.
you have the visual.
Exactly. Yep,
It's pretty hard to hide a major facility, you know.
exactly. So any questions, Mr. Chairman, on alternative B on the visual resource?
I'm not sure why that is green though. Do you recall why they put that green over there, that far over?
I don't.
I can't think of why they made that.
Danielle, did you have something to add? I thought I saw your mute button go off, or did we cover it?
Why is it green over to the west there, north and west?
Not sure on that one why that part is green. I was just going to add, especially in the north and then in the Little Mountain area in terms of the green. You see, I mean, all the ACECs are probably VRM too. And that's part of the expansion, but I mean, you have over 1 million additional VRM class 2 designations over the ACEC designations. So I think there's over 2 million acres of VRM class 2.
And what's the view shed? What's the distance on that class 2? You can't see it for how far away? Isn't there a mileage thing goes with it?
There is, but I am I am not recalling that mileage,
Yeah, I can't
but I
either.
think
Something's
there,
ridiculous, like 10 miles or something. You can't be able to see it.
yeah, and even under alternative B, there's a management action that expands that into a VRM class 3. So if your VRM class 3 is close to a VRM class 2, there's some type of restriction that would apply the VRM class 2 requirements even in a VRM class 3. If that makes sense.
No, it does not make sense.
It doesn't make sense, but yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner-
Megan, if you can pull up the area north of Rock Springs. And looking in there, they would put a VRM class 2 in the developable areas north of Rock Springs. So that would end development in the areas north of Rock Springs where they would expect a town to grow into in an orderly development.
Part of that green through there is because of the refuge. You have to be able to have 10 miles. When you're in the refuge, you don't want to see anything for how far. And they've already
Well,
got developments around there.
Yeah, there's developments interspersed with some of those already interspersed with some of those sections that they want to put as a VRM class 2. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
And that's problematic all through the checkerboard, because if you zoom out, Megan, on alternative B, look at all the checkerboard that's in there with those VRM classifications.
Which is just a layer on top of the already ACECs, right?
And expanded beyond the ACECs, right? And we can,
Because wasn't there more?
I can show you actually, Megan, if you want to pull up the ACEC layer.
Chairman West. So the ACECs are turned on. They're going to be kind of this dark green color that's going to be highlighted over the top of everything else. The biggest area that I can show just kind of easy difference for you guys is down here in the Greater Mountain or Greater Red Creek area, is seeing how far beyond this ACEC goes and is encompassing class 2 and class 3 portions as well.
And so that's some of that overlap that Danielle was just speaking to. more than
Exactly.
likely. Okay.
Exactly.
Pretty much wipes everything out.
Yep. Yeah, and pretty much all the area that's, well, not all the area, but in, the ACC designations is just up in the Jack Morrow Hills area has expanded out also. It's not just in that area, but you can see, there was a difference in that map of alternative B on the ACECs, and then you can see right there. And then you hit the visual resource management. And it's.
So this is A right now. The visual resource management plan, and then the ACECs overlaid on top of it, where the ACECs are contained within the visual resource management plan.
And some of that is to protect viewshed outside the ACC. And then alternative B. Yeah, huge difference. Okay, let's go to alternative C. Huge difference. Basically what it looks like there on our alternative C, under the classes 1 and 2s, those are over. So instead of designating them as areas of critical environmental concern, like we saw where the Little Mountain is, it is now a visual resource management too. So just so you know, these maps don't match up on any of these. So it's not to say, okay, it's an ACEC and then bam, there's a VRM2. They spread out further than that. And then sometimes
There's no basis for putting it in the checkerboard. That was totally thrown out in all the cooperator meetings, and then they come back in there and
Right.
You know, that's gonna
And
be
it's
a
even
huge
showing in a-
legal issue. How can you do that on a checkerboard and it's private land every other section?
Right. Especially when we're protecting scenic value when on the private section.
Right.
Okay. Any questions on alternative C, Mr. Chairman?
Can you zoom in real quick, Megan, down on the Little Mountain area? Is that blue? Is that like the Pine Mountain, right? Am I seeing that right? On the right side there?
Yeah.
The east side.
Yeah.
And then on the west side, that'd be like the Sugarloaf Basin area?
Yes.
Okay.
So those were the areas that were found by the current RMP that don't meet ACEC designation, and those would be a class 3, the way those are shown on alternative C. Which means you could still develop in there, but you just have to go to BLM colors, things like that. Try to blend things in with the surrounding area.
But even this obviously affects the checkerboard there.
Yep. It's still in the checkerboard. But you'll see under, well, there's still some issues with alternative D.
Thanks.
You bet. Any other questions? Okay, let's go to alternative D. So and just from my understanding too, so we could go up, let's start up in Farson this time. And I believe that area north of 28 is a visual resource management too, because of the trail corridors in there, the Mormon Trail, the Oregon Trail and such. So I believe that's what why those are class 2 up there. And then most of the area in the Jack Morrow Hills is all class 2. There is some, obviously the class 1 in the wilderness study areas, but then the blue area is that Red Desert watershed area. That is a class 3. And then in the checkerboard area, and I don't know the explanation for this, but it looks like on the west side of 191 heading south from Farson, all that checkerboard in that area is a class 3, where the other side is not. And then everything south of Green River on 190 or not, well, south of Green River and down 191.
Because it's along the Flaming Gorge.
Okay, so that, at least that area is designated class 3, which would still allow.
Class 2 is green along the gorge.
Yeah, he's talking about the blue.
Oh,
blue.
you're talking about the
Checkerboard.
blue is further out, yeah.
Yeah, so that's all. Yeah, right. Yeah, I see what you're saying, that green area.
Green's the gorge,
Right,
it's
because
more
of the gorge,
restrictive,
yeah.
They want to have.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, still checkerboard issues there. And then the areas when you get down to the south, Little Mountain, Sugarloaf Basin and Pine Mountain, all of your class 3s actually. And then the Little Mountain area is a class 2.
It's basically making our whole county a park, really.
So-
National park, lock it up.
Any questions on that, Mr. Chairman, as far as alternative D on visual resource management? Oh, let's actually turn on the ACCs on that so you can kind of see. Okay, so you can see that visual resource management class 2 is following around those boundaries. Class 3 is outside of it in the Red Desert or Sugarloaf Basin, and then the Pine Mountain area. Checkerboard area, the areas around the gorge, obviously. Looks like the Red Creek area is a class 3. Not sure that other area to the north of that. If we go up north towards Farson, Megan. So as you can see, they're maintaining those class 2s around those ACCs. They are expanding them out, the visual resource management.
Well, that's not right what I said, because the gorge is blue on this one map.
Yeah, on the alternative D. Yeah, when you zoom in on
Oh,
it.
no, alternative B, it is blue. So that wasn't right when I don't know why that band of green is down there, because the gorge is further over and it's blue. The gorge
Mary,
is
I think-
blue.
Mary, this is Danielle. I think the green you're referencing is just the recreation boundary. It's not a VRM.
Oh, Okay,
Yep.
but it's still a VRM class 2 on this alternative B map that I'm looking at.
We're on D, Mary.
B. Yeah, you're on D, but I'm on B. Which I shouldn't jump ahead, but I'm just saying.
Oh, go ahead. But
I had told you that I thought it was the gorge that was more restricted, but it's not on the VRMs.
can you zoom in on that, Megan?
But that's alternative
Flaming
B.
Gorge,
B.
What alternative would you like to see?
B.
B? Okay.
You know, the beauty of this too
This
is
is
B and D
right?
sound very similar. So every time someone says B, is it B or C?
B
Boy,
as in boy.
David.
D as in David, okay.
Is this one, Megan, is this B or D that you have up now?
This is a B as in boy. And I would agree with Danielle, this recreation area right in here, that's where the gorge is at.
But it's blue on my map.
More of that should be ACECs if that's B.
Let me switch the ACECs. I forgot I had that on. My apologies. There we go.
Well, put the VRM map on. That is what got changed, is the VRMs.
We've got the VRM and the ACECs for alternative B up right now.
That's right. Before it was showing D rather than B.
Gotcha.
Well, if they don't get it with one, they'll get it with the other.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Jones.
Commissioner Tolman, you mentioned earlier that I think you were saying D makes the county a park. Did I hear you right?
B makes the
B.
county a park.
Yeah, I know, I'm,
Conservation
that-
alternative.
I know, I just thought you were talking about D. That
No,
was my confusion.
No,
Okay.
any other questions or comments?
So is the VRM 2 necessary, does anybody believe, on Little Mountain? Or is that considered too restrictive? That would be on D then, correct?
Correct.
D is in dog, would have VRM 2 on Little Mountain, and is that what you're saying is too restrictive?
No, I'm just saying that it's, because it's designated as a special recreation management area, I believe that's why they designated a class 2. They didn't want tall structures going in there. So if you're going to go up there and recreate, hunt, whatever, you're not going to have those visual obtrusions in there. It would be, you can't make it a class 1, it's not a wilderness area. But class 2, you could still put recreational facilities in there, like a bathroom and things like that, but they just kind of got to be hidden in a class 2.
And that would partially be the reason, but not entirely be the reason for restricting or preventing oil and gas type activities on Little Mountain.
And you're not supposed to, according to the VRM manual, you're not supposed to be actually regulating by visual resource management in prohibiting all these, but they do.
Right.
Because, like take a wind farm. How are you going to hide that in a VRM too? And so that, especially under alternative B, as in boy, where they have all those visual resource management. You're going from what's right now 582,000 acres of class 2 to 2 million, like Commissioner Tolman was
Right.
stating. In a sense, you are, because it's going to be difficult to do oil and gas activity, especially in those checkerboarded areas. I'm not talking about where Little Mountain is and those areas that we'd like to see some preservation, but in areas such as in the checkerboard north of the interstate that are class 2s that are of concern. So,
But I think that's part of the point, right? As far as the restrictions on Little Mountain and, wanting to protect wildlife and prohibit some form of development, the point is you don't have to necessarily lock it up through the max restrictions of an ACEC visual resource, and every other thing that they've thrown at it in alternative B, because by implementing a class 2 and alternative D, along with, recreation management areas, a lot of those still carry the same
Right.
prohibitions, right?
Right. Right, and there's other ways of managing those, but besides designating as those, and going to that extreme like they did in alternative B, with all those ACEC designations, using other types of management tools, just as the chairman was stating.
Because I think some of the fear too on the ACEC aspect of that is the max outside of what a wilderness study area. I mean,
Right.
basically, well, I guess that'd be a class 1, but that allows for the opportunity to completely shut off, whether that's to recreation or any of that, right?
Motorized access, that's a big issue, especially when you get into a wilderness area. Yeah.
And it locks it out for a long time. So no matter what technology becomes in the future, it doesn't really matter then.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Does a class 1 shut, can they use that as an excuse to eliminate roads? Because that's a disturbance to the visual.
Well, class 1 on here are just your wilderness study areas, so you can't have access in there anyway.
But a class
Didn't have
2,
use- Right.
class 1 and class 2 are both very restrictive. Can they use that as an excuse to close a road? Because a road can be considered a visual. I don't know.
I think
Restrictive is.
that's a question for the Bureau of Land Management. I don't know specifically.
The
But it
definition,
but it could shut down things like winter crucial range, big game range, could shut down a road for that, for a period of time. Maybe there's too many roads in an area and they want to reduce those down to one. We're starting to get into travel management, which is different. It's a whole other thing that was supposed to be a part of this plan, from my understanding. But that's something that could be brought up. Well, it's the class 2 area and things like that. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
well, the VRMs can be controlled by distance or by timing.
Okay.
So you could say, you can't go in Jackmall Hills or Steamboat Mountain until July 31st because the raptor nest.
Correct.
But down here they could tell travel and tourism, you can't go within 10 miles of the Oregon Trail for a visual.
Yeah.
With a bus.
Well, I think we talked about that in our meeting. Well, I think it was Island that brought it up on like 191 South, for instance. If we're talking multi-use, right? If depending on the designation, they can't do turnouts or they can't do, restrooms along what is the classification of the highway now that Janessa, American roadway designation, or I don't know the exact name, but
Byway, those scenic byways.
yeah,
Mhm,
right.
right.
So I mean, that would
Right.
restrict a lot of that, depending on which. Well, I guess the ACEC would restrict that completely.
Could be. Yeah.
And
Danielle, go ahead, Danielle.
yeah, I was just going to add and try to answer the question too about roads. It could prevent a VRM class 2 could potentially prevent the introduction of new roads and lead to the closure of some roads. A lot of times the VRM designations are supposed to consider and recognize valid existing rights and the like. So it would not maybe lead to closures, but I think if you're talking about BLM roads and travel management planning and going to closure of roads, you would probably see more closures starting to happen because of a VRM2 designation.
Mhm.
I think that's important, is that the language that they use in this document is what's so important, and the words that they use, so they could do something, which means the door's wide open, really, is all that means.
Exactly. And this is a layered document. So, Mr. Chairman, we could comment on ACECs or special designations, but if you don't comment in these areas, that's why the necessity of especially with visual resource management's hand in hand. Can be another management tool, but if you don't comment on both, these are the sort of things that can happen with development moving forward. Any other questions or comments, Mr. Chairman, on ACECs and visual resource management? Just where we're sitting right now with the document.
Trick bag.
Yeah, I mean, just the different layers are that much more complicated on the process. I mean, you all have a solid understanding of that, but it's just, you have a VR2, down south, for instance, to help preserve some of that area, but then that potentially could lead to road closures, but then you have another layer that's recreation management specific, but I mean, then you have ACECs. It's crazy how many different layers you got to pull and how they overlap one another. And at the end result, if you don't comment on all of them or careful on how you verb each of those, then
Yeah.
that's kind of the game, I guess. But
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Slaughter.
if I could, for our legal team here and our advisors, with respect to the travel management plan, do you believe that the BLM will wait until there is a record of decision on the resource management plan before they introduce that? Or what's the time?
Oh, yeah.
Think with that?
They can wait up to,
Wait till the end?
they can wait up to 5 years. They don't even have the one done in Kimmer yet, and it's been 15 years.
Okay.
They're starting to work on pieces of it, but,
Thank you, our legal management.
well,
A
Danielle.
lot of you
can
didn't know I
correct-
was a ventriloquist, so.
Remember some things. Danielle can correct you on some of this, correct me if I'm wrong, but Pinedale, same way. They took it by, the Boulder area. They did the transportation thing. I don't think they ever finished the Pinedale one, did they, Danielle, the travel plans?
I don't think so. I mean, that's the thing. They're normally supposed to do travel planning within 5 years,
Yeah,
but
they're-
the rate at which that actually occurs, and especially in the past decade, I would say is never met.
and Rollins, I don't think they've even started it. Kimmer's made a little start at it. Pinedale did the Boulder landscape and then it kind of ended. I don't know.
Hmm.
Crazy.
So, Mr. Chairman,
But John,
Commissioner Slaughter, so I think what Commissioner Toman is saying is the intent that they've put forward. I think that the comments that Eric and Danielle have been working on in terms of the transportation plan have included the fact that they don't have a full inventory of the roads, and thus the desire to simply punt that issue is inconsistent with some case law wherein you can't say it's authorized to just punt this if you haven't done the required process to get to the punting location. So I don't think it's appropriate to just punt that. Not that I don't think they have any intention not to do that, but I think that based on the process that they've used and the lack of a full inventory, I don't think it's acceptable to punt it. So that being said, I do also want to reiterate, I think what Eric is identifying, and I think what Commissioner Jones is saying, which is that the chairman is saying that there are lots of different layers, and I think Eric has identified the ACEC, the VRM, the transportation plan, and then also right of way. All of those work together to any one of them can have substantial impacts. Of course, VRM being the highest number in terms of square miles, but each one of those, you layer all of those on top of each other. Right away by itself can be problematic. So I just wanted to add that layer comment as well.
Well, could I say something?
that answer, you good, Rob?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Tillman?
They did do the zone travel maps. We sat in workshops. They've done, I think, all of them, the inventories. I think they have it ready to slap on us. But your point is right. There are also other different reasons for closing roads. But we've had all those workshops by zone. And so that's why we had Felderman do that map he found on the BLM. And we had the regional meetings to extend those roads where the public said they wanted them extended. So that's the map you have that Jean printed out. So I don't know. But the thing is, you have to comment, Danielle already knows that. You've got to make sure they leave out any reference to road closures in this plan, because that's not supposed to be a road plan, right, Danielle?
That's correct. And I think the big issue too, and maybe also what you guys are referencing is the off-highway vehicle maps. Because the entire area is almost limited to designated roads and trails. So there's a big issue because there isn't any actually designated roads or trails without a travel plan. You know, they can make the reference to limited to existing roads and trails at this time, and during travel planning, they will designate what roads and trails are actually open or closed. So that's a big importance in terms of the terminology they're using in their plan and what they're planning for right now if they're going to wait on travel planning.
Right, and the problem the county had in claiming every road was that we have so much checkerboard, you'd have to get right of ways through the RSJ and all the private holdings. Moffett County went through. It was interesting when I went to Craig, the back way down through Hiawatha, there are 2-track roads, County Road 112. It's a little 2-track. They went through that process and they claimed every 2-track that they could possibly claim, and they put a number on it and they designated it. This will be a county road not to be maintained. So they claimed them all and they just gave them a class, A, B, C, D. You're going to be fully maintained pavement. You're going to be gravel. You're going to be a 2-track. So it was really interesting driving down the highway. You'll see the 2-tracks have county road signs on them.
Mm-hmm.
But we never did that because of the checkerboard issue.
Okay, any other questions on visual resource?
Probably not. I have something to say about travel, but I don't know if we're getting to that or not.
All right, so now we're moving on to right of ways, Eric,
Um,
or did you have more to add to that?
no, just basically just one more thing to add is there's a lot of, one of the things I included in your packet was the oil and gas well locations and units, which is important when you're talking about visual resource management. And even in areas ACECs, is there's a lot of existing oil and gas wells that are located in the checkerboard on the eastern side that are in these proposed visual class 2s, which are an issue in it, and also kind of in the northern section up towards the Pinedale field office up in there. So that does create issues. That's something that they're supposed to be looking at when they're analyzing these things of what is already existing. So if you're there to preserve existing view sheds and you already have oil and gas wells, those are things that should be analyzed as that underlying resource that's already there when you're looking at protecting scenic. Okay, so if there's one thing, if it's an open area and there's scenic value there, then you want to classify it as a 2 or 1, whatever. But when there's already existing stuff there, that's already breaking up the view shed. So what are we protecting there? So just some things and some of the arguments that we're going to be making moving forward in our comments. So that's all I have on that, Mr. Chairman.
Very informative. It's a lot to take in. I mean, there's just the difficulty with all the different layers. And like you said, none of the plans match at all, right? I mean, they're all different and none of them have a common theme among them per se, right? So
Right.
It's interesting.
So as far as the right-of-way exclusions, typically that's what you'll see in some of those class 2s. They become right-of-way exclusion areas. And so you'll see them in the areas of critical environmental concern, but also through the checkerboard on those maps, a lot of those do become, right-of-way exclusion areas, which also is problematic, especially in the checkerboard.
Especially when it's running right down next to the interstate.
Right.
It's
So
quite
that,
interesting.
right. So we do plan on making comments on that, Mr. Chairman, as far as the right-of-way exclusions. Go ahead, Meg.
This is the right-of-way exclusions for alternative B. Just for a frame of reference, if I were to toggle them on with the VRM, you can kind of see through here where you've got your class 2 is where all of the right of ways restricted. Following those major roads.
Right.
But they were very tricky. Last June, That's what that part of that packet that Randy Shipman gave us, and CLG did comment. Federal Register said that they did not have to follow the right-of-way exclusions for wind and solar. So that's how they went under the table around us. CLG did comment on that. And I shared it with the Pulse group also.
So you can see that's hand in hand, Mr. Chairman, forward. And what we're looking at, information I need, and especially we have task force meetings and such, as you have, Mr. Chairman, is kind of where we're sitting. We're making arguments on ACECs. We have some, as you see, the CLG has made some arguments on those, is where do we stand? And, I will say this, in the past, the county, as far as the letters, some of the comment letters I've seen, I've sent you some, the ones that I could find, we're in protection of Little Mountain. That was a huge, wanting that as ACEC and SRMA, and class 2s down there and things as that's. So moving forward, where do we sit? And is it alternative A, the way things are existing now, which is problematic, as you saw on the checkerboard? B, which I know the answer to that one. We don't need to talk about. Alternative C, which basically removes all the ACECs and puts those areas in special recreation management areas like Little Mountain. Or alternative D, which is a mix of ACECs smaller than what we currently have, especially in the area by Adobe Town. That whole Monument Valley area has been removed as an ACEC. That's what I'm looking for today, Mr. Chairman. Or is it that we have an opinion about one ACEC and the rest we could do without? So just throwing that out there.
Any feedback on that, commissioners? I know that's a lot to take in.
It is. And we don't have to do that today.
Yeah.
But just want to at least get the discussion going.
We can opt out of any of the CLG comments, but we have been commenting consistently on behalf of the county for 12 years on this plan alone.
Well, if I understand it right,
Doesn't mean we could change,
CLG took alternative C, right? As far as
D.
essentially no ACEC designations.
Danielle, can you comment on that, kind of where CLG is sitting on ACCs?
Just for comparison.
Yeah, I would say it wasn't alternative C exactly. I think there were some of the ACECs under alternative D and what were previously existing ACECs that we said made sense and that they should continue. I can't remember the exact ones that we agreed with, but there were some ACECs we did agree with. And I think there may have been a different position on the Little Mountain for the coalition versus Sweetwater County. But for most part on all the other ACEC stuff, I think we were in alignment.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Jones.
Danielle, are you specifically saying existing or future ACECs?
Existing and future, I guess. In terms of alternative D, never proposed any new ACECs. They reduced some of the ones that were existing under the current plan that's in place. And so it would be that they agree with some of the continuation of those ACECs into the future under this plan.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't see a need for additional ACECs.
Mm-hmm.
The main difference was on the VRMs in Little Mountain. But we had pretty hefty discussions as cooperators. We did not see the need to go along with the Greater Little Mountain Coalition to go to a class 2 VRM.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was the major issue we had a difference with. It wasn't the county, it was Wally Johnson, and I think Island can talk to that.
Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Commissioner Richards.
I think the CLG's position on these is pretty good for Sweetwater County. And I see this letter in here dated 2016 under a county commission letterhead. So that'd be April 19th, 2016. And this letter under the letterhead basically says that the Sweetwater County Commission supports the Greater Little Mountain Coalition's plan for Little Mountain. But having done a little research into the minutes of that meeting, the Greater Little Mountain Coalition did present to the commission that day. And there was discussion of commissioners saying, thanks for presenting, thanks for the work you're doing. But there was no motion and no action by the commission as a whole to take that position. There was simply a letter signed by the chairman taking that position. So I can't say, looking back, using the minutes that we have to refer to as a record of this body's decisions, that this commission did support the Greater Little Mountain Coalition's position. I'm more inclined to think that the CLG represented our interests a lot better than this letter did.
Mary, did you just say the CLG did not agree with the class 2 VRM
Well, it's in
on the
his
Little Mountain
packet,
area?
January 3rd letter, also from Commissioner. This is where they said they supported VRM 2 instead of VRM 3. The cooperators supported alternative D, which was a class 3 in Little Mountain. This letter of January 3rd, it was the same thing. I don't think it was ever supported by the whole commission.
I haven't researched that one.
But it's not, right? Isn't it class 2 and alternative D?
Well, it is, but for a shorter distance. They asked for a class 2 to go way out, like the Greater Little Mountain Coalition. That was the difference.
And to add some context on the VRM discussion, there was still, because of all of the VRM designations to the north under alternative D, the coalition opposed a lot of that additional VRM designation as class 2 because it was still over 1 million acres and substantially increased from what it was previously under alternative A.
So there were some class 2 down there, but they just wanted to take it way out. And Wally supported taking it further out.
So, Mr. Chairman, the differences between D and A on visual resource management on the Little Mountain area, it's increased to the class 2. From A to D as in David. So it isn't. They commented that way, but
Well, from A to D, but D to B is huge difference.
yes, yeah. Oh, yes, for sure. Gotcha. So that's the question, Mr. Chairman. And if we're, as Commissioner Richards has stated, do we want to go along with coalition local governments comments moving forward? Because I believe in just looking at some more recent letters from the CLG in 2019, they had made some concessions on Steamboat Mountain as long as it was getting smaller, which it has. So that's the question out there.
Do we have those comments?
No, problem is they're
Sure. Yeah.
difficult. Fine.
And feedback,
Well, the summary I
Commissioners?
gave you today that will have some dates on it. And I have the notebooks with the letters. I have most of those letters in the office if you want to.
Well, I think Eric's looking for some direction on how to prepare our response.
Well, I kind of agree with Commissioner Richards. I mean, that there's been a 12-year history of commenting by CLG. Unless we have some really glaring reason to change our position as this commission, I would recommend that we just continue on, because otherwise it's going to create a huge workload for our legal team to all of a sudden take a different course.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Jones.
I guess I would just make a comment that the direction I lean is towards the least restrictive.
Right.
And there's lots of reasons for that. I mean, I take issue with keeping the public from using the public land to begin with. But after this RMP or whatever the course of action is, whenever the next step is, if it is travel management, we need to realize that travel management is done. They have completed it. They haven't published it, but they've completed it. The reason is because if you look at all four alternatives currently, there's different travel management for each one. So it is in fact done. They've done an inventory of what they think are roads. I don't know that definition, but they have done that inventory and detailed how many roads will be open or closed or what have you. So to go into that process with anything less than the least restrictive doesn't seem to make sense to me, because we're going to get hit twice. We're going to get hit 4 times, but it doesn't make any sense to restrict the public and then go into the next step and restrict more and go into the next one and restrict more and continue down that path.
Well, I think in terms of restrictions, right? I mean, I think you're talking more on the recreational aspect of things.
Actually, not
No.
just recreational. I mean, since that's the portion of the task force I'm on, yes, but you know, the more I look at this thing, it's motorized access. It's not recreation. It's way too simplistic to say recreational access because it's motorized, oil and gas. Yeah, side by sides, but like the OHV language, their definition of OHV is any vehicle that could or would go off of a main road. That's a Subaru, that's a Jetta, that's a whatever. I mean, it isn't just so much recreation in what people want to view as a side-by-side type of situation, or a Jeep. It's anything with a motor. So maybe that's so you can go out and ride your mountain bike, whatever the case may be, but it's in many cases it's recreation, but I guess I have a big concern of what the negative impact this is going to have on oil and gas and being able to access locations. Because I don't know.
Yeah.
It may be detrimental, it may not, but so that's why I don't know why I would support anything less or anything other than the least restrictive.
Well, I think some of that came about just because, you know, obviously we support development. I think responsible development is something that all of us would share, and even those that are in those industries. And, you know, Little Mountain has always been visualized as, you know, a big recreation, you know, sport, hunting, camping area. And so there is a movement out there that doesn't want to see a lot of, you know, development in that regard, but at the same time, they do want to see, you know, wildlife opportunities and recreational opportunities and not have it, you know, fully released in that regard. And maybe there's some argument about additional trails and, you know, whatever, but I think throughout this, whether it's an ACEC or recreation management area or visual resource management area, I mean, I think there's different protections you can layer in there to have the same message. Is kind of what I'm taking away from all this, and that maybe, you know, the greater Little Mountain area has expanded beyond Little Mountain, you know, in terms of alternative B and what's proposed there, but yeah, maybe there's portions within D or even C that makes sense that still accomplish a little bit of both in terms of multi-use. And that's something I think I can support.
I just point out the wilderness study areas, we don't have any say-so over those. There are 13 of them, but I think we only actually have 7 wilderness areas, isn't it 7? That are actually wilderness areas. The wilderness study areas are treated like a wilderness, and those say mechanized, no bicycles even.
Right.
In the study area as well as the actual wilderness.
Right.
But that's a congressional issue.
Do you have anything, Commissioner Slaughter?
Mr. Chairman, I would just kind of echo the sentiments I think that you and Commissioner Jones have laid out. I tend to see in my mind, that what the plan is bringing forth is the most restrictive environment. And I tend to be on the opposite of those poles. I also would adhere to the comments that you made with respect to Little Mountain and those areas. I believe that there are some areas where we should have additional protection potentially. But I think maybe this area has painted a very broad brush stroke on those areas where it should be using more of a scalpel and choosing those areas a little more discreetly rather than just saying we're going to have an ACEC over this entire area. So I guess for purposes of trying to give my overall opinion, I would tend to agree. I would lean more towards having less restriction and believe that it would be in the best interests of the populace of Sweetwater County for us to attack this plan from the perception that less restriction is better. And I say that with respect to not just the travel, the tourism, the wildlife. I say it with respect to our mineral development. Each of those things, I think, and obviously we want to protect some of those resources. Our wildlife is extremely important to us. And those corridors are extremely important. We need to be aware of those things and we need to protect those. But I think we can do a better job than what this plan does. And I think by narrowing those things down and being less restrictive, we can do a better job of that.
The definition of the RMP was supposed to be multiple use for sustained yield, and they violated that to the ends of the earth with B. That's my comment for the day.
Commissioner Richards.
I would say that the folks who are supporting alternative B and the BLM staff who forwarded it as a preferred alternative, did the people of Sweetwater County, Wyoming, and even the United States a disservice, because they had an opportunity here to present a plan that balanced all of those needs. And instead they proposed a plan that used broad brushes to just end development. The problem isn't just the visual management plan. The problem isn't just the right-of-way exclusion map. The problem isn't just the ACEC maps. The problem is when you layer all of those things together, it shuts down everything. So we can't just say, okay, we got to fight this map or this map. They've put us in a position where we have to fight the entire thing in order to bring the conversation back to a reasonable plan. And I think that's why I support, just like you guys do, the least restrictive possible plan that we can fight for now, so we can have a reasonable conversation about protecting the things we want to protect. But if we just throw out, with the BLM throwing out a plan that just protects everything, then nothing is special. If the entire county is excluded from development, Little Mountain isn't special. And I've said it before sitting up here, Little Mountain is a gem. We need to protect Little Mountain, but you don't protect something by putting a fence around it and saying nobody can go there anymore. If you want to recreate on Little Mountain, which I want to recreate on Little Mountain, I spend months of the year out on Little Mountain. You can't do that if there's no roads. You can't do that if there's no access. And this broad brush eliminates access. And if it doesn't do it now, because we don't have a travel management plan, it opens the door to a travel management plan that does exclude travel. All we got to do is look to Moab to see how the BLM is planning their travel management plans. They're planning to shut down roads. And I don't think we're special in that. That's their overarching goal. And the only way we protect that is to take the extreme opposite position as our starting point and then negotiate from there.
How's that for some direction, Eric?
Well,
I think that was very well
so what I'm
summarized.
taking
I
from
mean,
that is, if you go under alternative C for the special designations and management actions, visual resource management, we're looking at that's the least restrictive. As far as as far as those areas go, the same would be on right-of-way maps and such. I think that's what you're stating. I have that correct, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Richards?
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a lot of, as we keep saying, different layers, and I don't know that we really need to take action today, but I think you've got enough information to maybe provide some direction for you. And if we need to have, more in-depth conversation in our next
Okay.
meeting,
Okay.
I mean, I hate to keep pushing it away, but it's obviously a very important topic, and I don't know if we've answered everything you're looking for or not.
Well, we can pull, if there's some areas, we have a meeting with Danielle and Mr. De Leon on Friday. If there's some things as we're looking at in discussion, that's what I'll do, is just plan on being at the next board, say, hey, this is kind of where we're at now. This is what we're going to propose, and see how the commissioners feel about that. I feel good about that. If you're good with that, we can do that.
I think that works.
Well, and you always have the caveat, they have the ability to manage any of those lands as much as they want without all of those hard classifications.
Agreed, Ms. Commissioner.
So
Mr. Chairman,
why,
Commissioner.
why lock us in?
Right. So, okay,
Well, thanks for putting that together, Eric and Megan.
yes,
Very beneficial to be able to layer in the different pieces there and put a perspective to it. So job well done with that.
And John,
anything
don't
else?
forget John.
He told me not to thank him anymore privately.
he did. I was there. I was a witness to
We
that.
need to pass a resolution that he can entertain in no more high-risk activities until this is done.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Jones.
I know it's been said, but I think it's worth saying again. Megan, John, Eric, Danielle, thank you for everything, because you guys have been rock stars in this whole thing and putting information in front of us and in a way we can understand it, which is very difficult. So thank you for all your time and your efforts.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's just, it's an important piece, but right, when you look at the entire document,
man,
that's just
yeah.
a sliver of what's actually in the details.
Right.
So that tells you how difficult this process is and the amount of research, and I don't know, there's a lot to take in
Yeah,
in a
there
short
is.
amount of time.
There
So
is.
we certainly appreciate all you all have done, and we'll continue to work on it as things progress. But thanks for putting that together.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, thank you.
All right. With that, commissioners, that does conclude our meeting, unless Mary has anything else she'd like to add. No,
Still 10
I
minutes.
didn't even get a laugh out of her there. No, I appreciate everyone's hard work, including you, Mary, just teasing you. And with no further business, we'll see you on the 19th.